Hello, everyone. Welcome to From Head to Heart and Home, a channel created by women, empowering women to take intentional action to create the life they want. Our hosts are Shanda Soretti, certified transformational coach, and I'm Carla Center, subconscious healer. So today we wanted to talk about being a fixer. Shanda, you want to share your thoughts first?
Oh my goodness. Thoughts and experiences and past life and all the things. This is such a big topic, I know, for both you and I. Something we are very excited to share with you. So, oh my gosh, where do we begin? First of all, if you guys know what a fixer is, if you feel like you've ever been a fixer, let us know in the comments, right? Always share your feedback with us. So, for me, in my past relationships, before I started doing any type of healing work, I actually used to call myself the fixer, which is freaking hilarious now, hindsight on the other side of it, because what I realized was happening was this. First of all, I was fulfilling a pattern, right? So I was finding people in my life who served me in a certain way, who filled a role for me to complete a pattern, if that makes sense. So I was ending up in these very specific types of relationships. Now the people were different, from person to person. They were different across the board, but the general experience was the same. Okay, so I thought that I was a fixer. I thought that, I would get into a relationship and there would be all these things wrong with the other person. And by the way, with myself as well. But here's the funny thing, there were all these things wrong with the other person that I saw an opportunity. And this is before I was a coach. I saw an opportunity to help them, to support them, to heal them, or fix them.
Right.
So, being the person that I am and was, I took liberty and did that, right? And what happened as a result was that it allowed me to be distracted from my own healing work, right? This was way back when I was in my addiction, smoking, drinking, just really a very, very different person than I am today. And so it allowed me to focus my energy on the other person. And it was a distraction or a self sabotage mechanism to help me not do my own work. Right. And it took years after until I actually realized, oh my gosh, the reason why I've dubbed myself this fixer is so that I don't have to work on me. If I'm working on somebody else, haha, this is wonderful news. Look what I'm doing. I'm such a wonderful person. Yeah, there's a few things with that, right? And it never allowed me to work on myself. It never allowed me to turn inward and start pinpointing the things that I need to change. Because if you guys have been listening to Carla's and I's conversation, you'll understand that we can't change other people, right? We can try, and if we're trying from an empty cup, it usually results in us being very sick or having a big impact on us. And that's what would happen, right? So you can't fix other people, but you can absolutely work on yourself. So it wasn't until I came to that realization that I was like, wow, this is a game changer. I get to focus on me and work on me, and then witness the other things in my life changing as a result, right?
Right. And I have some similar stories, but also different because I did not call myself a fixer. I was delusional and just marked it up to being part of being a caretaker and being nurturing. So I didn't even want to admit to myself that I was being the fixer. Um, so my relationships, same with you. Friendships as well as with my significant others, I would do everything to be somebody's best friend, to be the perfect partner and never look at my stuff. Um, have an inkling in my relationships with um, my romantic relationships with, oh my gosh, they're going to someday see me. So I knew there was stuff not right about me, but more focus on taking care of all their stuff, making sure that they don't have any of the emotions that I was not comfortable with. Right. So making sure that they always felt loved, taken care of, that they didn't get frustrated or mad or angry or any of the things. But it was like you, I was avoiding working on my own stuff. Absolutely 100%. Um, Even when I was doing social work back in my 20s, I was doing the same thing with my clients. I would put everything I had into my clients, and be like, I'm just this great social worker, but I was not dealing with my own stuff, which, like Shanda was just saying, you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pouring out of what becomes an empty cup.
Mm.
So then it's confusing to people because you're two different people, right? Because when you've been the fixer and you're fixing thing, and all of a sudden you're angry. And sometimes over the smallest little thing. And the reason why is because you let it build up. Well, you've been fixing everything. You've been pouring from this empty cup for so long. And then all of a sudden, like all the emotion behind all of it and stuff that has nothing to even do with that person just comes pouring out when you do that fixer. And it's also part of that. We've labeled these emotions that we say are negative as not okay for people to feel. And so we try and rescue people from their own feelings while they're on their healing journey. Like, we don't even see that we're taking from them in their healing journey all these possibilities for them to have growth
Mhm.
and just to, they're on this journey to become who they are meant to be. And we're stepping in thinking that we're helping them
Mhm.
when really we're just adding blockages to sometimes slow down their healing journey.
Yeah, I think that's really huge what you said there around trying to do the work for people is you're taking on their own experience of being able to heal something and move past something, which is so powerful. And I remember the first time I heard that because when you think of being a fixer, you're like, oh no, that's a good thing. I'm helping people.
Right.
And it's like, yes and no, right? You're stepping over some serious boundaries and some serious lines in the sand, right? And I think it's important to understand that just like we have to do our own work, everybody else has to do or gets to do their work too. And you made such another brilliant point too, Carla, when you were saying when we try to fill other people up from an empty cup, what I saw was this. I pictured when we get to the bottom of our cup and we're like, there's nothing else in here. Picture this like hidden well, okay? That all of a sudden that opens up and all of our crap pours out. So we might be okay until the very bottom of our cup, like till the very last drop. We're like, no, it's totally fine. And then bam, uh-oh, all of our stuff comes up and out. Like you were saying, anger and resentment and all of these things. And we're like, wait a minute, I don't even know why I feel this way, but and they're strong. They're not subtle. They come swinging in like a hammer, right?
Right.
So, I love that you brought that up. And the other thing that I wanted to share too is this work is like a continuous thing, right? So we're always practicing. That's why I like to call it a practice. And I love working with my clients so much because my clients serve me with reminders of some of the things I may have forgotten or some of the things I may have overlooked or started to take for granted again. So working with clients keeps you very like engaged in this type of work both for you and the client. So it's such a beautiful symbiotic relationship.
Right. And I completely agree with that. And if I have clients that have the same thing, multiple clients that have the same thing coming up, I'm like, I need to look at my stuff.
Yeah.
Is this going on with me? So, and that's the thing about it, is that you watch your clients, and not only do they remind you, sometimes they bring up something that you didn't even realize was there.
Yeah.
And and it can be very easy when you're in service to forget to fill yourself up at times, because you're so, you get so busy pouring into others, because that's what we love to do, right? We like to pour into others. And then you get so busy, like, oh my gosh, I have got to get all my clients in here, and this is going on with my family. And sometimes we forget to pour into ourselves on a day. You're like, but that day you'll have like 3 clients in a row that haven't been poured into yourself, and you're like, oh, I better not forget to do that today because it's not scheduled. Gratitude didn't happen this morning because I had to fit somebody else in, you know. And as a fixer, you don't even think about that. You don't notice that. It's just more and more frustration on top of it. You're like, and then you also are like, why is somebody not getting this?
Right.
I've just rescued you from this. Why didn't you learn your lesson about it? I took this on for you. And it's like being a martyr.
Mhm.
I took this on for you. Why don't you get it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's so powerful, right? When we say it like that, and not to be like abrupt or brass about it, but sometimes we need to hear things very direct, right? And like Carla and I have said and have promised from the beginning, we're not going to kind of dance around the themes and the ideas that we want to share with you. We're going to share with you from our hearts, from our own experience, so that you hopefully gain a new perspective or learn something through the process, right? We're not going to do you any favors if we dance around what we're sharing with you. So hopefully this is hitting home for some people. Hopefully it's resonating. If it is, feel free to let us know in the comments. um you know, where do you find you tend to be a fixer the most? Maybe it's not in your relationships anymore. Maybe you have a spouse. Maybe it's with your kids. Maybe you try to fix your kids and fix their lives and make sure they don't get hurt and all the things. You, the helicopter parent, right? So let us know where this shows up for you. And a question that I wanted to ask you, Carla, you had mentioned this in the beginning, was um, you found yourself being a fixer so that you didn't have to feel the emotions that you were uncomfortable with. Can you
Right.
explain that a little bit more so that we can really get a better understanding of what you mean there?
So if I avoided, so first off, if you fix everything for people, there's less likelihood of conflict.
Mm,
I hated conflict. Conflict would be, I want to curl up in a ball if there was any conflict. Um, so then I was a people pleaser, not just a fixer, but a people pleaser. So I didn't want to experience that. But also, so if you don't let somebody close enough to you to really get to know you, if you don't have to make those connections because you have had painful relationships in the past, in your childhood, romantic relationships, if you keep that distance, if you are just focused on the other people and they can't, and you don't have that connection with them, you think you do, you feel the feelings, you think you, but when you really said, how much do they know me? They don't really know me, but then they can't judge me, then they can't really hurt me because I've kept this wall up. I've kept this wall of protection up so that somebody doesn't really know who I am, so that I can't feel that deep sadness if they leave. I can't feel that anger when they do something I don't like, because and then they will be mad at me if I'm angry, right? Because a nice girl doesn't get angry.
mm,
Um so you just keep this distance between the two of you, which is, if you think about it, really crazy, because you want to fix them. You want to be really in the middle of all of their stuff, but you don't want to let them in yours, right? Even
yeah.
though people are a reflection of what's going on with us,
Yep.
that's what we're drawn to. But we're like, oh, so like what I was saying about, don't they just understand this? Well, that's a reflection of me. Why am I not getting this?
Right.
Why am I not learning this lesson to where I keep doing the same things over and over and over again and ending up in that same space? So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And something that when you were saying about it's a reflection, right? It's being mirrored back to you. I've heard that many, many times, and I really believe this is true, because everything around us in our lives is feedback, right? Everything is feedback about how we are showing up in the world and how we are
right.
taking action in the choices that we are making. We don't think it that way, but it is that way, which is fascinating. And maybe we can dive more into that in another episode. But um, something that came up for me was my dad always had this saying, and he would still say it to this day, is whenever you point a finger at someone else, there's always three pointing back at you, right? So
Mhm.
I think that's brilliant, right? Like, before we point a finger, before we judge, let's take a look at ourselves, because it's likely something that we're projecting onto somebody else, and it's actually really about us, right? This is also something that I work a lot with my clients with. And so something to Carla, while you were speaking, that I jotted down a few words. When we're in um when we're in this fixer mode, what we're allowing, what we're creating is people pleasing, conflict, distance, right? We like to keep people at a distance, at our comfort, whatever and it might be different depending on who the people are or person is. We keep them at different levels, and it's focused on self, right? Through avoidance, but it's still
Right.
self focused. It's what we want, it's how we feel comfortable, and it's what we allow. Okay. So, what you're missing out on when you're in this fixer phase or stage is authenticity, connection, intimacy, love, and and really connecting and creating relationships with other people. So it goes from being about us to be or about us to being about everyone or them, right?
Right.
So it's not so self-focused, it's inclusive, which is really important, I think.
Absolutely. And you, until you experience it, you don't realize like how deep the love can be and the connection can be until you do it. Um, because somewhere, and you might not even be conscious of the moment, it was a connection made you feel feelings you didn't want to feel, and so you learn to do that, to be that distant. And as the fixture, you're keeping that's your safety zone. You have this in your subconscious mind. You filter out anything that could be feed that connection. So you are going to see all the ways that people need to be fixed, because that keeps that connection, right? This shows you that, okay, I'm right about them. They have all these things wrong with them, so I need to keep my distance, but I can fix them, right? Like my romantic relationships would be, and this is the reason why I'm so vulnerable with my clients, is I don't expect them to be vulnerable with me if I'm not vulnerable with them, right? Because when I was a fixer, I had that distance. So I want that connection with my clients. But I would always find these relationships where they were wounded and they had deep pain like I did, but I wanted to fix them, but never had that real connection, right? Because of that. And I I absolutely wasn't fixing myself, right? I did social work, and I was such in fixer mode that I didn't even see that I was masking over my own stuff while I did that. And the more connected, the more beautiful, deep, loving relationships we have in our friendships, and it makes our jobs, our daily life, everything just that much more beautiful. You don't realize the beauty of those connections until
Yeah.
you start having them.
Yes, 100%. So it's like what I like to kind of look at is look at like those of you who are listening, kind of look at your life, look at your relationships, just your relationships right now. And if you could rate every area, so with a partner or a spouse, with your kids, with your parents, with your siblings, whatever that looks like for you, if you could rate all of those areas on 1 to 10, right? What would that look like? Because let's just say you have a really strong relationship with a spouse, but you still have that distance, right? Think of how much stronger and deeper that relationship could go if you were willing to be completely authentic, if you were willing to be vulnerable, and you were willing to just open up and not have a guard up. It would change everything. So, and then with the relationships where you really feel like, oh, there really isn't a connection, think of how those could shift and transform in letting people in. It's scary. Yes, it is scary in the beginning. I will say it, I'll be honest in saying it can feel really scary. But on the other side, the experience is like, it's very much worth it. And I have a belief that we get to do scary things, right? We get to do the scary things. It's not a sign to stop, it's actually a sign to keep going. So I will keep driving that one home. And another thing, too, is that if you are a fixer and this is really resonating with you, there's a root. Okay. There is a root to why you're a fixer. You could try and figure out what that is. If you feel comfortable going back through your timeline, you can do work with specialists around that as well, or you can just work on you right now and moving forward, right? There's two ways to always do this work, but I feel like sometimes when we can uncover those roots, we get a much more clear understanding of why we are the way we are, and actually how we are, because we might have a perception of how we are, but it might be skewed, right? Because that's what we do as humans. We take information and we skew the information so that it fits our needs or fits the story or the representation that we need to convey, right? So that's another reason why I feel like coaching, healing, this type of work is so beautiful, because for some of you, it could be your first experience ever coming to a relationship where you're not judged, where you're heard, where you're seen, where you get to come as you are and be authentic and messy and just let it all be okay.
Right.
Right. So for some people, that's your first experience of ever having that. And it's really transformative to have that experience if you've never had it before. And that in that type of environment, that safe environment that, Carla and I as healers get to create for our clients and followers is, it's really nurturing, but it's also super healing, right? It promotes healing. When you feel safe, when you have trust with the person who's leading and guiding you, you open up and your transformation, what am I trying to say here? It like skyrockets, right? So I just wanted to share that quickly because I felt like it was the right time to mention how powerful this type of work is.
Yes, absolutely. And when your comfort zone is to keep you safe. And so it's to keep you safe from experiences like Shanda was just talking about, the things that have happened to you in your past, the root. And as you step outside the comfort zone, as well as doing some healing on the root, you start to become more aware of the different things that you had no idea that you do or don't do.
Mm-hmm.
And the possibilities, how many possibilities there are. The amazing things that happen outside of your comfort zone is once you start doing those steps, I'll be honest, when you come up there, you're like, even if you're like, oh my gosh, do I really want to do this? But when you step outside of it and you're like, I had no idea this was possible for me. I thought this was only possible for other people, because we're in this comfort zone is like almost like a safety cage, keeping the possibilities in our life narrowed down, in our relationships, in all kinds of things, what we do. And when we step outside and we become our authentic self, you are just so shocked at what you can do and what you see in the mirror when you look at yourself and you're like, wow, I didn't even realize what was possible for me, because I didn't completely realize who I am.
Yes. I just wrote down what you're saying equals a different experience of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
When you're willing to step outside of your comfort zone, you will have a different experience of being yourself, because you're
Right.
going to learn, like Carla was saying, the different parts of you that maybe you kept hidden or covered up or tried to avoid or whatever it may be for you. So the comfort zone, right? It is where we feel the most safe, but it's also where our patterns and our history and our traumas live and fester, right? So our job, and any person, I want to encourage you all, any mentor, any type of coach or healer or guide who you decide to follow, right? Hopefully is a choice from your heart, and it's their responsibility to stretch you. If they aren't stretching you, I would say find somebody else who will stretch you. Because as so long as we're staying in that comfort zone and you're like, yep, I got this, this is comfortable, this is working, you're just going to stay as is. We want to be continuously expanding and growing, right? That's what this is all about. And it's not to say that you're never going to, arrive there, because you will. You'll continuously arrive there as long as you keep expanding and growing. But there's a saying, new level, new devil. Okay. So every time you create a new baseline, like let's say your habits were all out of whack and you finally nailed down your habits, you got some really healthy foundations in place, you've created a new baseline, right? That is the new autopilot. And once you step up on that next step, you're going to see different things. You're going to see different challenges. You're going to see different opportunities, but you will see both. So it's important to have somebody who, first of all, understands that, but can also lead you beyond that, right? You always want to be stretching. So you always want to be a little tiny bit uncomfortable. If you're like, life is gravy, that is a red flag that you get to stretch yourself in some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
Right. Wow, I love that. It's almost like um I was thinking, I was visualizing like a bathtub in stagnant water. It's like, clearing yourself, getting all cleaned up in a bathtub, and then just using the same water over and over again if you're not being stretched. And, getting it just right at first when you're running your bath water, it can be a little too hot at first or a little too cold, uncomfortable, but then you still get it just right. And for me, each time I step out, it's getting that it does get there, that balance, but it's like as you test the water and you get to really like you do get it in that spot that feels so amazing. And then you're like, oh, well, see, I didn't get stuck at too hot or too cold. I did get it just right. And that's way better than the stuff just sitting there. And I only got to a one spot and it's going to get all mucky and yucky if I don't take it to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're always, we're committed to our journey. We're committed to always being curious about like what's next. And again, that's not to say that, this is a never ending thing, but it isn't. Like if we're explorers in our own being, that is something that I find super exciting because it means that there's so much information and knowledge inside of me that I haven't even uncovered yet,
Right.
right? And I find that exciting. Some people might have a different perspective, but I would challenge you to think like, what if it was exciting as opposed to daunting, right? What if this healing work was enjoyable? And even if you might not enjoy every single modality, tool, or exercise that you do, what if the results on the other side of doing those things is always worth it, right? So there's different ways to kind of think about why we do what we do and why this is important to us, right? And hopefully this is important to you too, and that's why you're here. And again, sharing with us in the comments, like, why is your healing journey important to you? Why did you start? And why do you want to keep going? What's on the other side of your results? I would love to know.
Right, right. Just to hear what got you going, what got you, because it's different things for
Yeah,
different people. My story and your story is very different, and everybody's is. And that's what, when you look at each person's healing journey, this is why we can't fix for somebody else, by the way, because it's what works for us at a different point is totally different. Besides that, we can't do something for somebody else, what works for them may be totally different than what worked for us. And we love when you share that with us, because then we can also share our experiences with you. And that's why there's so many different kinds of coaches and healers, is because at different points in your life you need different things. And the the saying that one thing is just that's the end all be all, right? Like this thing got me through everything,
right.
means that we're not expanding. And when I think of what Shanda was saying with like the excitement of the new stuff, um, I was told by a mentor, and I may have shared this last time, that fear is excitement rebranded. It's not, it's the unknown. If we, as a child, when there's the unknown, we're excited, like what's next.
Yeah,
Think about Christmas morning because you don't know what's going to happen, all those little things that like we don't know. And then later we've been taught, oh, we don't like surprises because who knows what that is and what we're going to have to do to deal with it and all that stuff. But the stepping and the not knowing and seeing it as an excitement and what's next, like that's what I think of with the healing journey. It's not about, oh my gosh, it's this daunting never ending thing. It's like, oh my gosh, what's next? what's coming for me next, what do I get to learn. And it just, I don't know, your life shifts in so many exciting ways as you go along. And once you see that as the excitement versus the fear, like for me, it's like, ooh, what is next for me?
Yeah, two things. I love what you said about fear and excitement. What if this whole time we have been misreading the cues from our body about excitement and fear?
Yeah.
What if we're just misreading it because of programming, what we're being taught, how we're being taught certain things, past experiences? We like to slap those labels on there real quick.
Oh yeah.
So what if it's just a miscommunication? What if we're like, ooh, what if that feeling in the pit of my stomach? Because I can guarantee you, this would be a really cool exercise for you guys to do, actually. And before you dive into this little exercise, tell yourself you're okay. Nothing is going to happen to you. You're fine. You're safe. But take yourself on a little exploration of emotion for a second. And I want you to close your eyes and I want you to feel what fear feels like inside of your body. Where do you feel it? What's the sensation? What like give it some terminology, right? Describe it to yourself how it feels. Okay. Once you do that, do the same thing. Close your eyes. Feel where you feel excitement in your body. So, how does it feel? Where is it in your body? Right? What are the sensations associated with that? Because I can guarantee you they're close, if not the same spot. Right?
Right.
So, it depends on our preconceived ideas of the experiences that we're about to go into, whether it's excitement or whether it's fear. Huh? So I think that's super fun little exercise to try. And Carla, I also loved when you said one size doesn't fit all. Like it's not a one all be all. And I say this all the time. I'm like, you can do therapy, you can do coaching, you can do psychology, you can do work with doctors, you can work with yoga instructors, reiki, massage. I don't care. You can work with all the things. There are so many different tools. You guys use them all. Is my advice to you.
Right.
But there is no one thing for everything. I feel like, and that's the fun part too, is you get to try all these different things,
Right.
right? So and like Carla was saying as well, what works for one person might not work for the next, which is even more of a bonus or a blessing that there are so many things to pick from. So don't be overwhelmed with the plethora of options. Again, it's a really good thing because let's just say, I'm just going to make this up. Let's say there are 10 options, but what if 8 of them don't resonate for you? Oh, well, okay, I have 2. Let's try those. Right? So just keep trying. Always keep trying something new. If you hear about something, it piques your interest, try it. Right? Give it a go.
And sometimes something doesn't resonate with you at a certain point in your healing journey, and later you're like, you completely forgot about it and it comes back. um and I've had that. That's why I got, I'm sure Shanda too. We got trained in so many different modalities because we got so excited and they came up, but people would suggest things to me and I wouldn't even notice. And then I'll come back to them later and share like this excitement of this new thing that I learned. And they're like, don't you remember 6 months ago? I told you about this, because things at different times resonate with you differently. So also be aware of that. Just because you didn't feel connected to it at the moment doesn't mean that it later it won't be like the thing that for this next step.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Absolutely. That's very true. I've had clients say, I tried the thing, didn't like it. We do it months later, weeks later, and they're like, oh my gosh, this was amazing. Right. Um, so I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What or how what advice, first of all, let's start with this one. What advice do you have for fixers today? So who's somebody who is deeply entrenched in their beautiful fixing ways? What advice might you offer somebody who wants to, now with this newfound information that we're sharing, they might want to start working on that and changing that?
I would first say nurture yourself some. You need to fill your cup. Because if you're a fixer, I have never met a fixer who has a full cup because they have been pouring and pouring from their cup. That would be the first thing, is nurture yourself, look for a way to fill your cup. And also look for a way to have some connection without fixing the person. And if that feels too overwhelming and daunting, look at yourself. What is holding you back from wanting that connection to the other person that is outside of you doing for them? Just having that connection that is not about you just pouring into them and not receiving back. Those would be the things I would say to look at, because really it's when you're a fixer, you're not necessarily looking at your own healing journey. And so if you want to have better relationships and also, better health for yourself and all kinds of different things, really look at your and what's holding me back from having that connection with somebody. What can I look at within myself, not from their point, not about what's going on with them, because like Shanda said before, we can't change somebody else. We can't change it. We can only change ourselves. And it could very well just be that we start working on ourselves and then we're like, I had no idea how deeply connected I could be to this person. And they weren't even doing anything on their healing journey at that point, right? Because it really all starts with us. It starts from the inside out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that advice. And what I would love to add to it is whenever we have the urge, excuse me, to want to start fixing people, right? Whenever we want to kind of overstep those boundaries and do the fixing, I would gently say pause and then take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, how can I apply this to myself? Right? Because if everything is feedback and everything is a mirror, if we're always projecting our things on others, why can't we just take that information and apply it to ourselves, which is, by the way, where it wants to go anyway,
Right.
right? So just flip it around or put yourself on the other end of it. Like, how would you help yourself? What could you do for you? So it comes kind of back to what Carla was saying about making sure you're filling your own cup, right? So take your own advice, which is usually the hardest thing to do, but start there.
Right. And there's a reason that advice came to you, actually. Quite honestly, it came to you because that's something that you get to work on, and that's the reason why you saw it. And that, like Shanda said, we'll tackle that in
Yeah,
um a different talk, but it's beautiful the way you said it, to look in the mirror and be like, where can I apply this in my life, right?
yeah. Because we're so quick to jump on the other people. Well, they did this and they need to stop doing that and they need to fix this. And it's like, hang on a minute. What if all of that information was only meant for you, but you're just kind of passing on the buck, right?
Right.
What if you took the information and were serious about applying it to your life? I guarantee you, your life will transform if you do that one thing, right? That one thing, because like Carla was saying, that information is meant for you. Those are your lessons. Those are your lessons. Whether you're ready to hear them, apply them, that's up to you, right? And everything in its own time. I know a quick little story. Way back when I was a smoker over 10 years ago, I had family members offer to pay me money to stop smoking. And I knew that it wouldn't work because it that I was like the why behind that isn't important enough. I'm like, sure, I could have used the money because I had no money. I was completely broke because I spent all my money on drinking and smoking, right? But it still wasn't enough to make me quit, right? So I wasn't ready yet for the lessons. They came hard and they came later, but they still came.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And I'm going to say, as a former fixer, what I had to tell my children, because I would always try and save them from their lessons, that the same lessons keep coming up till you learn it. So I had to learn that I was not saving them. I was not keeping them from any pain or any negative things happening in their life. I was just keeping them in that same space until they learned their lesson.
Yep.
And so that's one of the things I learned from stepping back, because you don't want to see harm done to your children,
Yeah.
but if they can't learn their lessons, then it will keep happening to them, the same thing.
Absolutely. So I think this is cool. This just came up in my mind. Instead of from here on out, if you are or were a fixer, I want to erase the word fixer and we're going to write you are a you're a perpetuator. right?
Yes.
Because that's what you're creating. You're creating because you're taking on their lessons, right? So you're allowing that same thing to keep happening over and over again. So bye bye, fixer. And I keep wanting to say the wrong word, but perpetuator. Okay. And so that one might hit some people pretty hard, pretty fast. You're welcome. I'm not going to say sorry because again, sometimes we need to hear these things very loud and very clear. So I'm going to shout it from the rooftops.
I love that. I love that. And that helps because that's one of the things, because sometimes, somebody can say, well, look in the mirror and this is your lesson. But I love that you call it a perpetuator. But I wanted to, we are keeping people. So that's why I
Yeah,
use my kids, because as a parent, you're like, ooh,
yeah,
ooh, I don't want my kids to be stuck in that space. So I love that, Shanda, the perpetuator. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, we and genuinely the intention out of under all of this, you guys, is from a place of love. We want to help those people. We want to help our kids.
Okay.
But when we understand that it's actually something different, right? Because of our past, what we're trying to create is control over something that's not ours. But then it's like eye opening, like, oh, I thought I was doing this from a place of love and encouragement and all these things. It's like, no, you're overstepping your boundaries, right? And that is not from a place of love. So how can you step into love, right? As a result, maybe it's as simple as encouraging your kids to do XYZ or stop doing XYZ or just being there to listen to them and offer
Right.
a safe place, right? Offer a place where they know that they can go to and be themselves without being judged. That's all our kids need at the end of the day. I know we're kind of way off on a tangent here, but I feel like it's important to touch on that when it comes to our kids, right? No matter what age they are, it's it's really wonderful to create those spaces that you feel safe, you feel loved, and you feel not judged, right?
Right. And when you always have the answer for them, instead of allowing them, like, just being there through the process and supporting them, and they learn how to solve these themselves, like that. The thing I realized is, what if there is a time that I'm not there and they really, really need to solve this problem? Who's going to help them? Because I have not allowed them to learn how to do it themselves, right? I mean, I have one kid, she lived in a totally different state from me, and she'd call me and ask me phone numbers to places. This is just a really funny, because there's been huge things, but just the fact that she would call me about all these things, and I wondered, like, she lives 6 hours away from me, and how do you think I know all of this stuff, right? But because I'd always been the fixer, she goes, Mom, because you know everything, right? Because that's what I had taught her. I had not taught her how to solve problems herself, and she was in her 20s. And I said, no, baby, it's called Google and a discerning mind. I don't know everything. I am more than willing to dive in and learn new things. But also, you need to know how to do things. It's almost crippling to somebody if you always do the things for them
Yeah.
and they don't learn how to do it themselves.
Well, we're always teaching people how to treat us. Always, whether we know it or not. So if we're teaching our children to be completely reliant and dependent on us, that is what we're creating. That's what will happen. That will be the result. So we need to learn and understand how to create resilient children. Problem, what is it? Problem solving focused. Does that make sense? Problem solving focused or oriented children
Mhm.
who can solve problems for themselves. And at the end of the day, if nothing else, kids who are just willing to try. They're willing to learn. They're willing to figure it out, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a huge topic, right? The fixers thing. And obviously, it opens up a lot of different gateways and doorways to many other areas, as this conversation will show. Um, but I mean, I'm so happy and grateful to be able to share even just a sliver of what this means for both Carla and I, right? Yeah.
So, any last minute advice before we let them go?
Oh, geez, there's always so many things. There's always,
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, you may have learned something here today that you didn't know about yourself. And the one thing that I hope we always share with you is that when we're doing this work and when we're uncovering things about ourselves and our patterns and up until now, the way that we have decided to kind of live and be, it's okay, right? So be gentle, be kind, be loving to yourself. The only way that you can start making the traction that you want and create the changes that you want is through love, and it's not any other way. Trust me, I think I shared this before, but you have to love yourself through the process. You cannot hate yourself there. So whatever you may have uncovered today or whatever you uncover moving forward, love yourself, especially because of that thing, right? It's an opportunity to accept it and to own it. So that's my advice is self-compassion, self-love.
Right. Oh, beautiful. And I completely agree. Don't judge yourself.
Yeah.
Remember that this is part of your healing journey and your learning. Awareness is huge. And if we and nobody there's no such thing as perfect.
Right.
And if anybody's told you that there is, they're wrong. Um, so if you are compassionate and loving towards yourself on this, that is how you move forward, and not thinking that, I mean, first off, we learn from our mistakes. And one thing that has been taught to many of us with our culture is that you should just instantly be perfect at everything and then judge yourself if you're not. So as you see this as this beautiful awareness that you're coming to, and not, oh, I did this wrong, but wow, I didn't realize this about myself and I'm starting to understand it. And this is a step in something new for me,
Yeah.
something beautiful and new for me, that is going to shift me more towards this beautiful life that I want to see, this beautiful light that's me, and not to judge yourself on what is perceived as something bad, because it's not. It's just learning. Learning is, there is not one person in the world that knew something. I've told this to many clients. You don't, like walking when you're a baby, you don't just instantly you hit an age and you can walk. Like you stumble, you crawl, you climb up on stuff and you fall. But that's none of that. You couldn't make it to the end result without those different lessons and figuring out what your balance is and all of that. And that's the beauty in all of this, is that you get to feel all these new things as you make along. And then you're like, wow, look at how far I've come.
Yeah. Yeah. And one final thing that I want to add is that how ridiculous is it to beat yourself up over something you didn't know?
Right.
We don't know what we don't know until we know it. So now that you have a new insight or a new, you've learned a new piece of information, now moving forward, you can take action. But at the end of the day, it's okay. It's okay.
Thank you, Shanda. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into our channel,
Thank
From
you.
Head to Heart to Home, with Shanda and Carla. So if you enjoyed our conversation, make sure to click on the subscribe button down there so you can get our notifications, and be sure to join us next week for another authentic, connected conversation. Bye for now.